Hello everyone and welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott, and this week our special guest, Katrina Kelly. Hi Katrina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now Katrina is an incredible person, as you will come to find out over the next half hour. She is the founder of the branch, the Lytham St Anne's branch of the Classical Association. That's the main association for the kind of public promulgation of classics in the UK. And she was the kind of youngest person since
1903. I was 17 at the time.
1903.
So back in 2014. We're now in our 5th year of running the branch and have become the largest in the UK, which is great and testament to the hard work of our president here and all of our committee and volunteers and everybody that helps us.
So we're up here in Lytham St Anne's. Hello everyone. Hello Pedro, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining in. We're up here in Lytham St Anne's. You can't quite see Lytham St Anne's behind us because actually the place is covered in fog at the moment. But we're up here for my presidential lecture, which will be happening in just a couple of hours' time. But we couldn't resist doing first our regular Q&A with you guys as well. So thank you so much for tuning in. Hello everyone. Hello.
Hello Francesca.
So we're going to kick off with a question, and it's going to be a question that we're both jointly going to answer and offer some thoughts on. It came in this week from Maria Marcu. I would like to know how a woman's place in the social ranking of ancient Rome and what freedoms and rights women enjoyed in ancient Rome compared to that of a woman of our times. Do you want to kick us off, Katrina? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's a huge question, but one that is very interesting and relevant. I think, first of all, you need to think about whether these are freedborn women we're talking about, or slave women, and whether, of course, they're married or unmarried. The woman's place, both in society and the home, varied greatly on whether she was married or not. Women tended to still be under the control and possession of their fathers, even after marriage, but at which point they would kind of pass into the potestas, or the power of their husband. But in a kind of public setting as well, when we think women weren't, of course, allowed to vote, nor allowed to hold public office, so very different to the modern world, thankfully. But they could still...
We've now got Brazil joining us in. Hello. Nice to see you guys.
Hello.
Fantastic. And we're talking about women, the position of women in ancient Rome. Katrina's been outlining, of course, it varied hugely. Freeborn or slave, depending on what age they were as well, moving from kind of under the power of the husband, power of the father to the power of the husband. No votes.
No role in politics.
No role in politics.
But they could still play an important role in public life, perhaps more so than we think. Women could be landowners, they could write their own wills, they could also be benefactors. In fact, one of the second largest benefactor in Italy during the Roman Republic, after Pliny, was a woman, Matidia, who set up a library and an alimentary fund for her local community.
So, I mean, would we be right in thinking that it was down to perhaps the power and canniness of individual women finding a way through the system to have influence and power, rather than the system ever being set up to give them power and influence as of right?
Yes, exactly. And often that emphasis and that push came from imperial women, from women who had power through their elite status or their family, through their marriages to some of Rome's great emperors, women like Livia, Fulvia, who really kind of set the tone, both which we see in statuary, in imperial images and on coins, and they were seen as the mother of the nation as well as of their own family.
Yeah, there are some Roman women, particularly the powerful elite Roman women, that I wouldn't want to mess with at any point in time.
The Roman matrona could be a very powerful lady.
And of course in religion as well, that's the other place to think. So outside of politics in religion, just as in the ancient Greek world and the ancient Roman world, women had particularly important positions in ensuring the survival, security and safety of the Roman world. I mean, if you think about the Vestal Virgins, right?
Yes,
you know, if they weren't performing their sacred duties properly, then Rome itself and the future of Rome fell into doubt. Yeah,
they had to vow for 30 years of chastity to ensure that they kept that sacred flame going.
That kind of thing. Hello, Rupa. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to have to lean forward to be able to read this. Interesting question to kick off the session, because I was just started working in a women's museum. Fantastic, kind of, indeed. And I mean, I guess, can you also tell us, different viewers, about the experiences of different ancient societies that you may have been studying, whether it's ancient Indian society of different periods or indeed further afield in ancient China, for instance? How do we compare and contrast the position of women in those societies with that of Rome or of Greece, as we've been doing briefly, compared with our own today? Hello, Sarah, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. We're closer to you in Scotland. In Lytham St Anne's, we're halfway to you, at least. Now, we're going to follow on with some questions that are very apposite to this evening's events. And there was a question that came in just a couple, I think it was last week, and I didn't get a chance to get around to it last week, but I knew this was happening this week, so I was kind of holding it over, from Tantu Havina, which is, I'm quite intrigued about the Delphic oracle and it's being the centre of ancient Greece. Love to hear some more thoughts on the subject. Now, the Delphic Oracle is actually what I'm going to be talking about this evening as part of my presidential lecture here at the Lytham St Anne's Classical Association, and is a pet kind of project of mine going back to the very earliest days when I was doing my PhD work.
And of course your documentary.
And the documentary for the BBC. So I've been hanging around Delphi for quite some time. And the fog that's out here at Lytham St Anne's is giving us that mysterious atmosphere that's absolutely perfect to be talking about the Delphic Oracle indeed. Hello from Fiesole. Thank you so much for joining us from Italy. Wow, okay, so we've got...
I went there last year. I stayed in Florence for a month, trying to learn some Italian and visit some of the sites, and Fiesole is a wonderful place just outside Florence.
Just outside
very
Florence.
much worth a visit.
We can imagine exactly where you are right now. And the Delphic Oracle was, like Fiesole, on a hillside, crucially enough, kind of on the sanctuary of Delphi, stuck up a hillside. And therefore, 1,000 years, so the stories go, people were traipsing from all over the wider Mediterranean world to put their questions to a priestess who sat in a temple and was supposedly inspired by the god Apollo to give answers and responses to those questions. The crucial thing is that from that entire 1,000-year period, there is not a single surviving ancient source that from beginning to end tells us how a consultation of the Delphic Oracle took place. We have bits and bobs scattered over that long time period that tell us elements of it, but never the crucial bit, right? You never hear any source say, you stood in front of the oracle like we're sitting in front of you now, and you asked your question directly to them, and you got a response directly back. And instead, you get this scattergun of different possible scenarios, with everything from they were breathing in noxious gases to potentially eating some kind of laurel leaves to, in fact, this woman was just a puppet on a string for clever manipulating priests behind the scenes coming up with responses. But somehow this system endured and was seen to be trustworthy enough and useful enough for 1,000 years to have people coming to it from all over the ancient Mediterranean world. So it's kind of one of those eternal mysteries, right? It will, I think, forever be a mystery still, kind of all time. I kind of like that.
Yeah, it's therefore a place that always grabs our attention, isn't it? It's somewhere that, whether you've been or not, it's somewhere you always want to go back to. It's really got that pull and that draw. It's such a spiritual, awe-inspiring place when you visit.
I would say that's absolutely right. And if you get a chance to go to Delphi, if you haven't been there already, then you should definitely just take some time at the site. You know, often if you do it on a day trip from Athens, and things can be a bit rushed. So I always advise, if you can, book in to stay overnight in the local town of Delphi, just next door to the ancient site. Get there first thing in the morning before too many tourists come, and just sit in the sanctuary and just enjoy the environment. Because there is, whether you know anything about the ancient world or tons about the ancient world, there is something special about Delphi as a site. Thank you so much for your questions coming in. Rodrigo, I'm having to lean forward again to be able to read this. You've just finished reading The First Ladies of Rome. Okay, fantastic. Nice. And hello, Anthony, you've come in. We're coming. Hello, Katrina, how are you doing? Anthony, where are you based today? Where are you coming to us from? Let us know. And we had one other question regarding the Delphic Oracle as well that came in over Twitter from New Books and Welly Boots. So I have no idea. I have no idea who exactly that is. But if you're out there, New Books and Welly Boots, you were asking whether oracular pilgrims would have encountered the weather that they are currently encountering at Delphi at the moment. And as you may have seen, it's covered in snow. In fact, the whole of Greece is covered in snow.
The picture on Twitter today of the Acropolis.
The Acropolis covered in snow. I mean, the last time I remember that was 2004, just before Athens hosted the Olympics. And in the February of that year, it was covered in snow as well when I was based there. But I've never seen Delphi in snow, so I am very jealous about Delphi being covered in snow and wish I could be there to see it. But as to New Books and Welly Boots' question about would oracular pilgrims have ever seen that, then that probably not, because crucially, during the winter months, Apollo, the god whose oracle it was at Delphi, was said to have taken a break and gone on holiday to spend some time with a mythical group called the Hyperboreans. And in his absence, who got the run of the sanctuary of Delphi but another god, Dionysus? So this was the era, right now, the winter months was the era of Dionysus, and specifically the oracular priestess, the oracle, was not consultable during these 3 months. So you could only consult the priestess of Apollo at Delphi for 9 months of the year, and in fact only once a month for those 9 months of the year. So it was a much rarer occurrence than we might have in our minds. And when it did happen, there would be people turning up from all over the place and sitting around at Delphi in large numbers, but not, thankfully, in the snow. And I think it's one of those it's one of those things that kind of, there's a mythical explanation for it, but I think it makes perfect practical sense.
When you think about it, yeah.
No one wants to be hanging around in Delphi kind of in the winter months too much when it's pouring down with snow. So thank you very much indeed for that question, new books and welly boots. Thank you also for joining us in. Kind of, Pedro, there would have been a special amulet. There is a special amulet that Roman women wear. Do we know the special amulet that Roman women wear?
I mean, so freeborn, both men and women would wear the bullet, the symbol of their birth. And that was something that was kind of both very spiritual and important as a sign of familial identity. I'm not sure about anything specifically.
But you've been doing some work about Roman women in relation to your dissertation.
I have.
Because Katrina is
Yes.
an Oxford undergrad in classics at the moment.
Yes.
In her final year, about to take...
Finals are approaching.
Final exams are coming. You can see her kind of biting kind of
know.
slightly down on the fingers.
Yes, the nerves are
In fact,
kicking
she's
in.
missing an exam to be here today with us.
I hope my
Don't tell
tutors
anyone.
aren't watching right now. But yes, as we do 8 modules for our finals, and one of those options I've chosen is to write a dissertation, and I've chosen to write it on Roman women and their relationship with garden spaces, which is something we don't really think about, because I'm looking at it from both a private and a public sense. So women within the home, within the domus, and how the organisation of the space of the house is centred around the garden, and whether women are visible in that space or whether they're purposely secluded from it, because it's a place where it's a masculine area where social status is shown by the elegance and the objects on display in the garden, but is also seen as a place where women might work. They may be seen their virtues kind of in wool making and horticulture are important. And at the same time, I want to look at it from a more public perspective, so where women present kind of hard at work in the fields, in the gardens, which certainly non-elite women would be, and would be selling their produce. But whether gardens are, it's a way we can kind of interact differently with the view of women in Rome, whether they were seen or not seen, and how their relationship with the garden works. So.
Well, you've seen it here, people. The cutting edge of ancient Roman investigation and research is happening right here with Katrina with the dissertation. It's in progress.
It's in progress. It's coming along.
But
if anyone has any interesting ideas, I would love to hear them and include them in my work. But
there we go. Kind of, you can have a footnote in Katrina's undergraduate dissertation and a place in the acknowledgement. So send your thoughts in now, either live or afterward through the Facebook page, and we can pass them on. And I guess one of the other thoughts might be religion as well, and what's going on in the garden in terms of religious worship, because with the excavations that have recently been uncovered in Pompeii from Reggio 5,
yes.
some of the amazing frescoes in the garden spaces, but also some of the altars, that they're even able to know what kinds of things were being burnt
were being
on the altars.
placed there, exactly. And it's interesting how much we know from pictorial representation, so from murals and artwork, that show women actually performing these acts of ritual and sacrifice. It wasn't just the paterfamilias, the head of the family, who undertook the worship of his household gods. It was also the women's role. And I'm trying to uncover from the evidence that we have whether that was solely outside the kitchen, which is where lots of pictures we have show that this was where the worship took place, or whether it was actually also in the garden. In Pompeii, for instance, in the House of the Little Fountain, you can still see the altar where it is. And again, there's a visual axis of orientation from outside through the doorway into the garden and to this altar. And would we have seen the woman, involved in her act?
Okay, right. So kind of seeing the women in places that we haven't been looking for women kind of within the Roman world.
There may not be traces left of their presence, although there have been some hairpins found in beds of the gardens, which might, I lose hairpins all the time, so who knows if
so
we
do
could
I.
really use that
God,
as
my
evidence.
hairpins, they kind of fall out all over the place. They kind of in that sense. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. And Maria, thank you very much indeed for your question. What's been coming in? Are people able to read? Excuse me.
Well, maybe one day, hopefully, if it's good enough. It's
I'm
still a long way
sure.
to go.
Totally.
But yeah, I would love to perhaps turn it into an article or a published paper at some point in the future, because I think it's a really interesting area, really interesting topic that hasn't really been fully uncovered yet.
And if you are desirous to read the undergraduate dissertation when it comes out, kind of in the thing, before it gets published in full form, then I'm sure we can work out a deal with Katrina and potentially put something through the Facebook page, perhaps.
That would be great.
If we're very, very lucky. So watch this space, indeed. Did they, Linda? My God, you're all fascinated about gardens now. You've done it. You kind of,
I've opened the box on gardens.
Did they use specific herbs in their gardens?
They did. Yes, they definitely did. We can actually find there are crystallized remains of seeds that that have been excavated in Pompeii, in particular, from which we can determine exactly the sorts of herbs to those sorts of areas, just for the evidence that remains. But yes, we can.
I mean, I guess it's fascinating. It's one of those things that links us over leaps of time back 2,500 years or 2,000 years in the case of Pompeii, because we still live in homes right now. We've still got our gardens. The way our homes are set up, are structured, or what we choose to put in them are reflective of us, right?
Yeah.
In the same way.
We all have a very special relationship, I think, with our gardens, whether we realise it or not. Even in city spaces, and this was true of Rome as well, we try and have window plants, box plants, anything, house plants, anything, that gives you that sense of space and the garden space that you're lacking. So that was still a thing for Roman men and women, that to try and have a piece of garden in their homes. In the middle of Rome, you might not get any land space, but owning a piece of land was seen as a very part of Roman identity.
A sort of ancient version of artificial grass garden, kind of. Although, just remember, I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I once went into the BBC for a meeting and was shown into a meeting room that had a thick green carpet to it, and I asked them why this green carpet, and they said, in all seriousness, that they'd done an internal poll of their staff, and one of the things that had come out of that feedback was that their staff wanted more green space. And this was their response.
That's the way to achieve it.
If you can't get a garden, carpet at least one of your rooms. So we've had a couple more questions. Thank you, Linda. Thank you very much for your question, Roger. But to Katrina, how far was women's influence in the world of ludus and gladiators? Taking you on to female gladiators.
Female gladiators, yeah. I mean, our evidence for female gladiators is not as strong, obviously, as for what we have for male gladiators. Lots of that evidence is often from things like floor mosaics, as well as from inscriptions and evidence found in places we knew to be gladiator barracks and training areas. But obviously, most gladiators were originally captured slaves. They were prisoners of war. Most women who were captured would then go on to become slaves or the chattel of their victors. So we know a lot less about those that became warriors. Although, of course, the Amazons, who were famous and mythical, for their warrior fighting capabilities, were often portrayed in the ludus as the archetypal enemy, because it was so very fearsome that they were women. It was completely antithetical to the Roman way of thinking, and therefore something that was seen to be subdued and overcome.
So yes, I think the harder we look, or kind of the more closely we look, the more we can uncover about the place, the position, the perceptions, the experiences of women kind of within Roman society at all different levels and in all different places.
Exactly, and even if we can't find much from literary sources, simply because we just don't have much evidence of women writing, we can still look kind of through the gaps and the silences, and absence is often the best indicator of presence, that women were around doing these things, even if we can't quite prove it quite yet.
Now, talking about women, Katrina's picked out one more of your questions that she wants to have a go at, which we'll come to in a second. But I just wanted to stop us, because time is flying by, just to do our quick what's on and what's in the news. So, of course, in terms of events, there is only one place to be, which is Lytham St Anne's here this evening for the Classical Association lecture, which I hear is being given by somebody who knows something about Delphi.
I'm not sure who.
I'm not sure who.
Apparently he's come to the omphalos of Lytham St Anne's.
So if you can make it down to join us, we're looking forward to seeing you this evening. And if you can't, maybe we need to start thinking about how we video some of these lectures as well.
That is something we are hoping to do, and we do have our own YouTube channel, as well as all of our social media pages. At LSA Classics, little plug there for
at
you.
LSA Classics or www.lsaclassics.com. So
exactly.
yeah, get in touch and keep following. But if you can't make it tonight, then in terms of what classic stuff that's come in the news, I don't know whether you've seen this, that not too far away from here, when they've been widening the A1 road, the main old north-south road, they've come across new Roman settlements just by Scotch Corner. And the exciting stuff about this is that it's dating earlier than any of the Roman settlements that have been found at York or Carlisle, so from about AD 60. So now Scotch Corner is a big crossing point right now, and it's kind of fascinating that even back in the 1st century AD, it seems to have been the natural place for the Romans to sort of put down their encampment as they start that process of keeping control and running Britain as they will do for the following 4 centuries. So that's very exciting that we're dating back even earlier some of the Roman remains. And then if you are in California and can get to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library and Museum and Presidential Drive, there is right now Pompeii the exhibition. A little bit of Pompeii has come to you in California, featuring over 150 artifacts on loan. These are not replicas, but 2,000-year-old objects that have made their way over to sunny California, including frescoes, marble and bronze sculptures, jewellery, coins, and full-body casts of those that died in the volcano explosion. So you can have a little bit of Pompeii if you happen to be in California there indeed. Are there? Wow, here we go. We're going back and carrying on with the women. We're going to keep your question, Pedro, if we can, for a brief moment, and go to the other question that Katrina wanted to tackle, which was from Lucien Kairashi. Now, we hope we've pronounced your name properly.
Apologies
we
if
haven't.
not.
Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. But the question is, what's your view, what's Katrina's view of Clytemnestra? Do you think she was justified in her revenge on Agamemnon? Take it away.
It's such a juicy question. So Clytemnestra, I think she's one of the most compelling and complex figures in all the Greek tragedy. So Clytemnestra, who is well known as the murderer of her husband Agamemnon after his return from Troy, and that's the subject matter of one of Aeschylus's plays, so called the Agamemnon, the first in his Oresteia trilogy. And upon her husband's return from Troy, he brings with him his spoil of war, his new mistress, Cassandra, and it is at this moment that his wife, Clytemnestra, who is filled with maternal rage because Agamemnon, prior to the expedition to Troy, had sacrificed their daughter, Iphigenia, at Aulis in order to appease the goddess Artemis. And so I think this act, which is a bloody one, it's not actually shown on stage, but even cleverly by the playwright, takes place off stage within the house. All we hear are Agamemnon's screams, his pitiful cries from inside. This once royal king has been brought down, literally, to his knees. Is it seen as a justified act? So I think in Aeschylus's play, if we're focusing on that, it's justified by, obviously, what he's done to his daughter, Iphigenia, but we're made to really question this decision. The chorus are outraged at Clytemnestra's ongoing domination of the theatre space, of the stage, of the words and language. She really overcomes her husband in a kind of verbal battle when he returns after his 10-year absence from Troy. But at the same time, it's almost a question of, well, can she be justified in doing this act? She's killed her husband. And there's a point in the text when the chorus say that Agamemnon was wearing this yoke of necessity. It was a necessity that was put on him that he had to kill his daughter. He had no choice. It was a Hobson's choice.
Try explaining that
to
your wife
to
and
your
to the
wife.
mother of your
I
daughter.
had to kill her.
I had no choice.
Otherwise, the goddess would not let us continue our expedition to Troy. But in the Greek text, in the Greek verb itself, it shows Agamemnon putting on this yoke of necessity. It's not enforced on him. He makes the active decision to make this choice and to kill his daughter. And that's one level of justification for Clytemnestra's revenge. And another level of justification, which comes from the play, the trilogy as a whole, is Aeschylus's impression of the cycle of inherited guilt that comes way back in their family line. There's a series of myths, all interconnecting, which suggest that when violence is committed, there will be revenge. And this cycle will continue and continue. So it is destined almost that Clytemnestra will make her husband suffer for what he's done. But then in turn, Clytemnestra is made to suffer by her own son Orestes in the next play when he kills his own mother. He too is then pursued by the Furies. So it's part of a cycle. But I think Aeschylus is very clever in showing us that this cycle is not necessarily, she's not someone to be emulated or admired. This cycle is a sign of an archaic type of justice, which is ultimately self-destructive, violence perpetuating more and more violence.
So, I mean, it's not an easy play to watch, is it? Or an easy trilogy or an easy story to watch. And I think on one level, the reason why Greek tragedies are still so incredibly powerful is that they speak to raw human emotions and situations. That we can watch this play and we can say, well, you know, if I am a mother or a father and my partner chooses to kill my child, you know, one of my children, in order to further their worldly, we might even call it career ambitions, how cheesed off would I feel?
Exactly.
You know, what would I be justified in doing that?
And also when your husband has returned bringing somebody else with him. Although it should be said that at the same time Clytemnestra has also let another man, Aegisthus, enter her absent husband's home. So there is definitely blame on both sides.
And this is where it gets more and more difficult.
It gets more and more difficult.
A good Greek tragedy, I think, never ever leaves you with an easy choice to make.
No.
You know,
exactly.
No one in the audience would have made such, I think, an easy choice as the chorus on stage made, where they definitively go, come on, that's wrong.
And condemn her behaviour.
You know, you are left in a state of, I mean, the Greek word's aporia, isn't it? Kind of, you're at a loss at kind of what to make and how to make this very, very difficult choice. If you had been put in that similar situation. And then, as you pointed out, on top of that, there's that layer of the fact that it's not really something that's completely in their hands at all, that they're part of a much bigger process of this rolling cycle of justice and outrage, injustice and outrage, that they are actively choosing to be part of, but also at the same time swept up in.
And that's the point of the play's language as well, its own imagery and everything the playwright does to create this atmosphere and show just by little parts of speeches, little parts of little words that reappear almost subconsciously, that people aren't aware they're acting within a kind of wider tradition, that they can't escape their own fate because of the way the words are.
So, thank you very much, Lucian, for that question. And if you can, get to a performance of the Oresteia, or indeed any Greek tragedy anywhere near you, because you will be blown away by both how, I think, current the plays are, despite the fact they were written 2,500 years ago, and quite how much of a difficult situation they leave you in. And Linda, you're absolutely right. When you're talking about such violence coming from a woman in the ancient world, would almost immediately make people think that that woman had stepped outside her place, that she was, you know, overreaching the bounds of her power.
Clytemnestra, she's called, all the chorus can think to call her is a man-minded woman. Kind of, she's the
to
very
even describe,
to even begin to describe the sort of power and determination and domination that she.
But then you move on to a play like Euripides' Medea, and you get a woman committing similar acts of murder on not quite the same, but not an entirely different kind of reasoning. And at the end of that play, you see her being lifted up by the gods and carried away to a place of safety. So despite the fact that women are, in all of these tragedies, often overstepping the traditional places that they're supposed to occupy in society, and as a result being so considered by some within the play to be so dangerous, sometimes they are then being shown to be justified in that process. Guys, we've got time for one more question. So briefly, we could be going on about this for ages. Thank you so much for all your fantastic questions and interactions. But Lorna Donald has come in, just to end on a slightly lighter note. Lorna Donald has come in and asked, have you ever tasted the Roman fish paste that was part of the diet in Pompeii and indeed kind of throughout the Roman world? Now, I presume, Lorna, what we're talking about here is garum, this stuff that was made out of, I mean, it doesn't sound very appealing, mainly fish guts. Kind of, they're salted and fermented bits of anchovies and fish guts all mixed together with a nice healthy dosing of some more salt, and turns into this paste that was the kind of ketchup, I guess, of the day, wasn't it? Kind of, it was everywhere in the Roman world. Have with your fish and chips and everything else besides this garum. And there would be different levels of garum as well. So you would have, you know, your highest quality garum made with your finest fish guts that you would be paying through the nose for that would be on the finest dinner tables, and then would be the kind of daily bog standard kind
those
of...
that had been left to ferment for sort of even longer.
Yeah,
so something
vintage.
which sounds really quite horrid to us.
Yeah,
but
vintage garum. And this was brought home to me, kind of how far away this stuff gets. And I was looking at some of my ancient global history research, and I was looking in India, at the port cities in India. If you go to the eastern coast of India, there was a port city of Pondicherry, where there is evidence for Roman warehouses, and Roman ships were clearly getting round to the east coast of India and trading there. And they have found there the remains of pots that once contained garum, right? So this place was not just being used in Mediterranean, but people were choosing to take it with them, Romans taking it with them when they went abroad. So it's like a Brits going abroad with their Marmite.
Yeah, with their bottle of ketchup.
Kind of, I can't leave without my garum. And indeed, Lorna was also asking where you can get some to taste right now if you want to.
Wow.
And indeed, bizarrely enough, I was just reading the other day that in Italy it is making a comeback as your source of choice. Pondicherry and Pondica. Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Yes, indeed, Pondicherry and Pondica, the kind of as the site where this was. But in Italy, you can get it as colatura di alice. So it's made with the anchovies, not so much with the fish guts, better bits of the fish.
Sounds a little bit nicer for the modern.
Nice. And colatura di alice sounds quite nice, doesn't it, compared to garum? But apparently some of the top chefs in Italy are now returning to this extraordinary little condiment as a nice little aside for your dish. So there you go. Lorna, thank you so much. We are out of time. We haven't even had a chance to thank Katrina for coming on and joining us on the podcast, and also to say kind of what next for you. Where are you heading next after you finish your degree?
Yeah, so I'm finishing my degree coming up in June, and after that I'm hoping to do some more work that I've been doing with the LSACA and making classics accessible to everybody. I'm really committed to doing outreach work, and the point of our branch really is just to show that classics isn't an elitist subject and really doesn't have to be. It's something that's fascinating, relevant, and open to everybody of all ages. Our members at the moment are from as young as 8 all the way up to 92. We have a nice gentleman coming tonight to our lecture who will be there, who's already over 90, and just showing that classics, is such a great subject for everybody. So I want to try and do some more work to ensure that people can access the subject, especially kind of through social media, YouTube, things like Facebook Live, just to get it out to people. And I was going to say as well, if people unfortunately aren't able to come to Michael's lecture in Lytham tonight, he will be back. He will be coming back on Saturday the 9th of February to judge the final of our classics competition, which is open to students aged 16 to 19 to give a presentation themselves on their 3 favourite artefacts from the ancient world. If you want to go to our website and if you're interested in taking part of this competition, all the information is there at lsaclassics.com. And the deadline for entries is the 25th of January. If you are then selected, you will get the chance to meet Michael here and be judged by him and have the chance to have your say about the ancient
And even
world.
more importantly, get the chance to meet Katrina as well.
And always have a chat with me too.
Katrina, I think all of us here, that as we join our Facebook, the live Q&As each week, we are kind of fully behind the mission to kind of bring the wonder and fascination of the ancient world to as many people as possible. Thank you so much to all of you for tuning in, as always. If we haven't managed to get to your question, or if you come up with questions for Katrina or for me afterwards, do just send them in through the Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Michael Scott Academic, or to michaelscottacademic@gmail.com, and we'll make sure they get through to Katrina, or as Katrina was saying, through the LSA website, so www.lsaclassics.com. Have a lovely rest of the day and weekend, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. I'll be back next week, Thursday, the 17th of January, 4 o'clock, as always, and I will try to do as good a job as Katrina has done today in answering some of your fantastic questions. Have a great weekend and take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.